Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben, and this is the Smoking Hot Confessions Barbecue Podcast. Hey family, I hope you're well wherever you are and you got that thin blue smoke rolling. This is episode 3 of season 6, my US road trip part 2. In this season, I kick things off with 2 weeks in New Orleans. There I head to a couple of competitions and spend some time hanging out with the who's who of Southern barbecue. From there it's up to Kansas City for 4 days of barbecue nirvana at the National Barbecue and Grilling Association's annual Conference and Excellence Awards. The final 2 weeks of the journey see us head into Arkansas for some R&R, including bass fishing, monster trucks, a state cook-off association competition, an AK-47 and a brush with a tornado. And of course, you're coming with me. In this episode, I head down to the National Southern Food and Beverage Museum in New Orleans. There I chat with Dan Robert, the curator of meat science programming. Dan was born into a family-owned meat processing and smokehouse business in Louisiana, and after earning a degree in food science, had a 25-year career with the USFDA, traveling the US and the world inspecting thousands of meat packing plants. In this fascinating interview, I get a lesson in the history of meat in the US, and we also get into different meat processing methods from around the world. Before we get into it, I'd like to let you know about our awesome merch shop. We've got our incredible Smoking Hot Confessions tumblers, as well as hoodies, hats, t-shirts, and stickers. There's also 2 amazing ebooks, 27 Lessons Learned from Competition Barbecue, and the delicious Bacon Manifesto. Head on over to smokinghotconfessions.com/shop to check it out. I'd also like to invite you to join us at the Smoking Hot Confessions community on Facebook. If you're looking for a barbecue group full of open-minded people who just love to help each other out, the Smoking Hot Confessions community is a great place to continue the conversation. Finally, however you listen to this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. It really helps me spread that barbecue love. So without further ado, grab yourself a cup of thick black coffee and a big old lamb loin chop and join me as I take a journey through the history of meat in the USA.
This is the internationally awarded Smoking Hot Confessions Barbecue Podcast with your host, Ben Arnott. How long's it been since your last confession?
Are you looking for a barbecue store experience that leaves you not just happy with your purchase, but genuinely excited about it? Barbecues and More, the Weber specialist on Weber Drive, is the place for you. Family owned and operated since 2001, the husband and wife team of Jenny and Gary have been combining their love of smoking and barbecue with their genuine product knowledge to help their customers give a truly great barbecue experience to their family and friends. The product range is vast with all the smokers and barbecues from Weber, as well as GMG, Hark, Masterbuilt and Pitt Brothers. Then there's their famous The Art of Smoking classes that are regular sellout successes. Combined with a huge range of smoking accessories, rubs and sauces, they have all the right products to satisfy your needs. And your wants. Find out more at barbecuesandmore.com.au. That's BARBEQUES and more.com.au. Hey folks, it's a beautiful day in New Orleans in Louisiana here, and I'm having a great chat with Dan Robert, the curator of the meat science programming at the National Food and Beverage Museum. Dan, how you going today, mate?
Good morning. Glad to have you here.
Mate, it's great to be here. So, to kick things off, could you fill us in with a bit of your background in the in how you got involved with meat science?
Oh my goodness, we got to go back a long way. I was raised in a family, a native of Louisiana here. I'm 4th generation meat processor. We own 2 slaughter processing plants here in Louisiana that lasted 93 years.
Wow.
My great-grandfather started. When I graduated high school, I went to LSU, got a degree in food science and nutrition. Then I went to University of Missouri, Columbia, graduate work in meat science. After that, I had an internship with Iowa Beef Processors, IBP, in Dakota City, Nebraska, for a year. I came back from there, back to the university, Had several job offers, accepted a position with the USDA, Food Safety Inspection Service, meat and poultry inspection. I worked for them and the USDA meat grading and certification branch for 25 years. And so I'm retired from them. And my position here at Southern Food and Beverage is a great way, I guess, to share a lot of my experience and my knowledge that I've had the opportunity to be in over 700 plants, one time or the other.
Wow!
And you learn a little from everywhere you go.
Yeah.
What we do here, I teach all the meats classes, demos, meats classes. We do a lot of consultant work here, specializing with smaller to mid-sized meat processing plants throughout the country. Research and development here, new products, new techniques, seasonings, flavorings, you name it, we do it. And also we're getting involved into internships, job placement in the meat industry, in management and QC, QA positions.
Yeah, right. Wow. So with that kind of that family history in the meat packing industry, that 93 years, what's that? Your grandfather,
great grandfather
yes.
Kicked
that off, started that off.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you've done your time in that business, and then also 25 years with the USDA.
Yes.
How have you seen the meat industry sort of change and transform and evolve over that time?
It's well, I guess the only way to describe that is just use an example. I can go back in the 70s, in the 80s, say hogs. We're talking about pork. Well, back in those days, everybody said, "Oh my goodness, they're too fat. We're health conscious. We got to lean this up and lean them up, and it's too fat, and it's not good for you, and it's not good." And at one time, it was a huge problem for smaller processors because they had the slaughter weights down to 225 pounds.
Oh, wow.
That's what the packers were wanting. And just for a bacon, an example, I mean, it just wasn't big enough, thick enough. I mean, you might have an inch thick bacon. Well, nobody wants that,
No, that's...
And so it was a big problem. And, of course, we weathered through it. And then as time evolved, now the trend, you can't get fat enough now. You see what I'm saying? Everybody understands that fat is flavor. Lipid is flavor, you know. So now the slaughter weights have swung back to the average slaughter weight right now is 325 pounds.
Wow.
So we've gained 100 pounds.
Yeah, right.
And, the pork industry, is, as well as the cattle industry, has went through a lot of changes to meet customer demand with genotype, phenotype, with the breeding programs. So in other words, we've just gone in a big circle.
Yep.
So I've been doing this long enough to see the whole big circle come around. So I don't know what's next for the next 20 years. But one thing I have seen, and I was talking to a gentleman the other day, flavorings are changing at a faster rate than I've ever seen in my career.
Interesting.
It's all about flavorings. Let me give you a good example. Here in the Deep South, we like our food seasoned. A lot of people think that Cajun Creole food is hot. Well, we don't refer to it as that. We refer to it as seasoning. Yep. Seasoned. Layered flavors, deep layer flavorings, throughout a cooking process or whatever you're making. And say for instance, I remember several years ago, and it's still like that to a point. You could go to Michigan or you could go to Wisconsin or whatever, and say you would eat a smoked sausage or any type of meat product. Well, it was so mild, just salt and pepper, that's it. And very little of that. Some of them, I don't think they even put pepper in. They just showed the pepper to it. I don't know. It was that mild. And of course, down here we really like our food seasoned. So, say from the 80s till right now, and I'm a member of the American Association of Meat Processors. And, I've got friends all over the country that are meat plant operators. And some of the products right now in Wisconsin have more seasoning in them than we use down here.
Oh, wow.
So the younger generation, and I got to credit a lot of this with the snack food industry.
Okay.
Potato chips, for example. I remember years ago when I was a kid, there were only two flavors. There was original potato chip, just salt, and then barbecue. I remember when the barbecue flavor comes.
Okay.
Now you can go to the grocery store, look how many you got. You have 200 or 300
There's an entire aisle, 6 shelves high.
It's unlimited. Yeah. It's unlimited.
Yep.
So the snack food industry really had a main drive into the other food industry as far as the meat industry goes with flavorings. So you're going to see more and more of that flavorings. And I have processors right now that, in fact, I talked to one guy yesterday in Missouri. He makes 50 different types of bratwurst.
50 different types of bratwurst?
Yes, sir, for different flavorings. And I said, my gosh,
that's a lot of sausage.
That's a lot of different, how do you do, He said, well, if I wasn't selling it, I wouldn't do it. And then also, too, people really demand quality. In the old days, it was numbers. You just could not process enough livestock for the demand. I mean, it was just, and we always held our standards high as far as quality. But nowadays, it's all about quality. It's all about quality. You have different programs in the meat industry like Certified Angus Beef. That program kicked off several years ago, and it's the upper 2/3 of choice. I mean, people ask me, they say, well, where's the best beef, or where can I get the best steaks? And it's hard to say because there's so many, so much out there. I say, well, my advice is to go to your local meat market or go to your local butcher or grocery store, and if they sell certified Angus beef, you are assured that is the upper 2/3 of choice, and in some cases almost prime, So that's as high as quality as you really want to go, unless you want to go with the prime,
Well, that's an interesting point. I went to Costco the other day and I bought a bunch of steaks, and I didn't know what the difference was between choice and prime. Are you able to just quickly explain to me what
the grading standards? That's what with the meat inspection. Meat inspection involves to produce a regulatory agency that is over the sanitation and to make a product wholesome. In the harvest plants, we start with the antemortem inspection, then we do a postmortem inspection. Each animal is inspected.
Wow.
Postmortem inspection, each animal, and antemortem. In your major plants, there will always be an IIC, inspector in charge, which is a VMO, a veterinary medical officer. So if there is a carcass that is questionable, it's segregated off, and then it's finalized to be either passed or condemned.
So we're talking about things like tumors or things of that ilk?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The USDA meat grading and certification branch, they are USDA. It's two complete different agencies. What our purpose is to assure the public that if you buy choice beef, that's what you're getting. We're the ones that made that we graded the carcasses, beef, lamb, and veal, okay? And then there is poultry grading as well. We're the ones that slapped the ink on the carcasses.
Yep.
In other words, we made the determination based on many factors of the yield grade and the quality grade of that animal. So today what you see in the stores, now the grading standards are long and the different types of grades are long. In the grocery stores right now, the only thing you'll see is prime, choice, or select, which meaning prime would be the top of, that's the best you can get. Then choice, then below that select. Now there's some consumers out there that don't want a lot of fat, so they'll go with select grades.
Okay.
There's some people that the intramuscular fat or the marbling, choice is still not good enough for them, and they want the best, the very best, which would be prime.
Right. Yep.
So that's the way the grading standards, and then below select, you will not see that in the retail sector at all. That product. If they do not grade select, they go as no roll, what we refer to as no roll. They're just not graded.
And where does that meat go?
Mostly further processing items, ground beef, heat thermal products, value-added products. There's nothing wrong with the meat at all. The wholesomeness is not the issue. It's just the quality of it would not be, because the animal would be too old, or the sex of the animal, or the lack of finishing.
Yep.
So that product can be used for ground beef or stew meat or summer sausage or those type of items.
Oh, okay, right. So most of it still goes into food products. It's not
absolutely.
It's not wastage or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Personally, I would not, say for instance, if you had a prime steer, that carcass graded prime, I wouldn't want ground beef out of that. Personally, me, I would prefer ground beef to be from a grass-fed animal instead of a grain-fed animal, or an animal that would be a commercial grade or something that did not have a lot of subcutaneous fat or internal fats, or your marbling or your intramuscular fats. It would be a little leaner.
Now, that's an interesting point. Could you tell me a little bit more about the differences between grass-fed and grain-fed?
Grass-fed beef is really, really gaining popularity right now.
Is that because of an ethics standpoint, or is it all about the flavor of the meat, or is it both?
It runs hand in hand in both. It's a lot of grass-fed, people that like that product. They swear by it, and if that's what you like, hey, I'm cool with that. I mean, I'm okay. I don't prefer grass-fed as far as a steak would be or whatever. I prefer grain-fed. Now, ground, I'm the other way around. I would prefer grass-fed as I would grain-fed ground. It's just what a person really prefers. There was a study done a couple of 3 years back. I'll send you the link to it. At Texas A&M University, a graduate student done a really good research, health aspects of grain-fed to grass-fed.
Interesting.
And there were no differences. That's what the findings
That was not where I was expecting that was going.
And you some of the people listen to this, they say, that old man don't know what he's talking about. Well, look, I'm not the one that done it. Talk to them.
This is Adam from Texas Barbecue, and you're listening to Smoking Hot Confessions.
Clean Heat Charcoal is a leader in the barbecue scene, whether it's sponsoring festivals, supporting teams, or supplying fuels for your backyard cookouts. Their charcoal burns clean and hot and is also sustainable, renewable, eco-friendly, and 100% natural. Aware of their global responsibilities as an industry leader, their charcoal is made from an invasive species that is destroying valuable farmland in Namibia and Botswana. Clean Heat Charcoal empowers those African communities by offering employment opportunities to the locals that they wouldn't otherwise have. There is also the benefit of returning the local ecosystem to a state of balance, benefiting the local farmers and their communities. It's easy to see why it's the fuel of choice of top competitive teams such as the Smoking Joint, Suck Knuckle Smokers, and Smoke and Steel. With distributors nationwide, follow Clean Heat Charcoal on Facebook and Instagram to learn more. So is there a higher fat content in grain-fed animals then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. You would have, there's several fat deposits in an animal. The first fat deposit is KPH, kidney, heart, and pelvic fat. That's removed, the animal's born with it. That's removed at the packing plant, okay? Then there's subcutaneous fat. That's fat on top, sub-Q. Some people got more than others. I think I got a little more around my waist than you do. That's subcutaneous fat. Then there's intermuscular fat, fat between the muscles, seam fat we call that. And then the intramuscular fat, or the marbling. And the marbling can only be achieved by really, and there would be some people argue this, about the last 120 days of feeding, finishing that animal. And trust me, it is an art when you're feeding cattle to get to the point of where you want that carcass to be. Because when we look at a live animal, as opposed, and we're cattlemen as well, my family, we're in the cattle business, but we look at an animal different. I look at an animal not from the outside in, I'm looking from that animal from the inside out. When he's on a hook, bottom line, what he is going to produce for us to produce the highest quality that we can obtain, and sell to the consumer. And we do that by breeding programs and your feed, your feed rations. And it takes a long time to really get that right and down to a pat. The grass-fed industry, I really didn't think it would, really take off and go, but it did.
Yeah.
And it's here to stay. And people swear by it. And if again, I'm a type of person, if that's what you like, that's the best. That's what you need to be eating, in other words. Personally, again, with your middle meats, your ribeyes, your strips, so forth, we refer to as middle meats. I prefer grain-fed myself.
Yeah.
Aged grain-fed.
Dry aged, wet aged?
Dry aged.
Yeah.
Minimum of 28 days.
Right.
A lot of guys are, I shudder sometimes when I see, some of these chefs that, they're going 150, 175, 200 days. They're doing, and I'm thinking, wow, you're kind of pushing it, Here's the way, and I was talking to a cattle bar the other day for Tyson Foods now that owns IVP, and we were talking about that. And if 28 days of either wet aging or dry aging, either one, if that's not good enough, it's not going to get any better. Now, there's going to be a lot of people that will say, well, I'm going to argue that point. But as far as palatability, tenderness, 28 days, trust me, is
the line. Yeah.
That's what I would do, because the more you hang on to that product and age it more, the more you're losing, too. The more you're losing in yield.
Yeah. We're experiencing something in Australia where dry aging is becoming kind of a bit of a fad at the moment. So what sort of advantages would you have dry aging over wet aging, if at all?
Well, wet aging, you're aging those primals or subprimals in the cryovac, okay? So the breakdown of your connective tissue and to age that product occurs within that controlled environment, okay? The dry aging, you're removing moisture. So in other words, the wet aging, it's not allowed to remove moisture. So the dry aging would remove moisture from that carcass and develop more into a deeper richer beef flavor.
Okay.
I like both, you know. In the old days, when we aged beef, it was all, now it's just almost unheard of. You don't see that much anymore. Very few people do it. In the old days, dry aging, the whole carcass was dry aged. And a lot of times they were in coolers with infrared lights, black lights in there to keep the bacteria down. The coolers had to be kept extremely clean.
Yeah.
Very, very clean. In fact, I can't tell you when I was a kid how many times I had to scrub that aging cooler with an iodine-based cleaner that you know, my father was a stickler. The walls, everything in that cooler were stainless steel. The ceiling was stainless steel. The floors were even stainless. You know, the entire cooler was stainless steel. And so now you're seeing a lot of the chefs, and it's pretty impressive what these guys have done. They've done their homework on it. I've seen coolers lined with salt rock, you know, for added flavor. You know, all different types of situations where you can age beef, either wet aging or dry aging. But now they're using primals and sometimes subprimals, you know, to dry age. And there's a lot of trim involved when you do that. There's a lot of trim, you know. Dry aging is very expensive, you know, when you're in business. Because when you're in business, it's the bottom line's
turnover,
the dollar, you know, the money, you know. So the longer you hang on to that product, the more it's shrinking. And then, of course, you know, when you get ready to process it, there's a lot of trimming involved. And I won't get into the trimming part of it. There's some guys that are saving those trimmings and grinding them and using them. I do not recommend that at all. That belongs in the inedible barrel right there.
Why is that? Is that because that's where the bacteria builds
absolutely.
up if it's going to?
Right. It's just, and putting that into a comminuted product, you know, to grind it, you're dealing with fire right there for food safety. I wouldn't recommend it at all. But a lot of guys do it, and they swear by it. So, but personally, I wouldn't recommend it.
So, would you recommend dry aging meats for competition teams?
Not really. And the reason being, say for instance, with the barbecue guys, you know, for the most part, your briskets that you're going to be cooking, well, you put 12 hours on a brisket at 200 degrees or 225 or 250, you know, the heat is going to break that, you know. I mean, I could take a brisket out of an old bull, you know, an old tough old bull. You cook him long enough, it's going to be tender. You know what I'm saying? Like the old people used to say about barbecue, cook them till the bones pull. Cook them till the bones pull. There wasn't no thermometers. There's no controllers. There was nothing. It was just that pit master, he was out there, and he knew in his head when that meat was ready to go, when it was done, you know.
Yeah.
But some guys are experimenting with the competition circuit, wet aging their briskets. Again, I don't see any advantages to that. I mean, you know, your heat thermal processing, when you're cooking it that long, is going to break that, you know, it's going to break it down enough where the palatability or the tenderness is going to be there. So
it's kind of redundant.
Yeah, right. You'd just be wasting your time to do it. You know, I can't see any advantages with it.
Interesting. So then wet aging or dry aging is sort of more applicable for grilling then perhaps?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. Right.
So having traveled around the world, 700 odd plants, without getting into the political implications of it,
right,
would you be able to give us a breakdown of the differences between standard meat processing, halal meat processing, and kosher meat processing?
halal meat or halal form of slaughtering meats and the kosher form of slaughtering, they're very different. They're similar in a lot of ways, but they're extremely different in a lot of ways. They're facing, that industry right now is facing a lot of scrutiny worldwide. If I'm not mistaken, and don't quote me on this, but I'm almost certain, I was reading an article here recently that kosher slaughtering had been, and halal, had been outlawed. It's either in Sweden or Denmark. And,
Really?
And I'm sorry. I
Wow.
can't remember which one it was, but that was just here recently.
Yep.
Dr. Temple Grandin from Colorado State University, she's a good friend of mine, and she is in my opinion, one of the leading experts in the world on animal welfare. And she's a stickler, and I am too, for safety and animal welfare. From the old days, the Humane Slaughter Act, when it was enacted, it really cleaned the industry up. And the way the regs read still to this day is the animal has to be fully unconscious or impervious to pain prior to being cast, cut, or cut.
Yep.
And I'm almost certain that's the way the whole thing's still read. It's been so many years, but that is the way. With Food Safety Inspection Service, meat inspection right now, animal welfare is taken extremely serious right now, more than ever. More than ever I've seen it. And it's good. The meat industry has really cleaned their act up. These plants, major packing plants, they spend billions per year for animal welfare. The stunning design equipment, the restrainers, the audits, slaughter audits that are done. In fact, there is talk about some plants that are even saying that to do a live webcam at their stunning site that can be seen by the world.
Just to expose everything to the public.
Expose it, show it to them.
Right.
Glass walls.
Yeah,
Let them see
yeah.
what goes on there.
Yeah, transparency is kind of the buzz at the moment, isn't it? So,
the meat industry for years has been not had a real good relationship with a lot of the animal activists, rights,
Yep.
and this and that, and but in my opinion on that, people, we have to eat. We have to eat.
Yep.
And animals are raised for food. If that animal gives his life to sustain life to us, we have to treat that animal with the utmost respect.
Yep.
And that's the way I was taught all my life.
Mm. Yeah, me too. I grew up on a farm. We used to raise and slaughter our own pigs, goats, and sheep as well. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We never did cows because they were too heavy to haul up by hand on the on the engine block. But,
right. Well, it's a 1,500-pound steer is a little bit different from a 200-pound or 250-pound pig.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the process then in a modern Western plant, the animals come in, they get stunned with the electric hammer gun. Is that right?
Well, you're talking cattle.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Prior to the processing of cattle, the cattle are unloaded at the facility. They're given a rest. They're given access to water at all times. If they're held over till the next day, they must be fed. Okay. So most of the beef plants try to run them all in that day. There's an antemortem inspection, before death inspection done, normally by the veterinary medical officer, and then with the plant personnel in different lots of cattle going to slaughter. If they do happen to notice one that's maybe limping or doesn't look just right, they'll segregate that animal and then put him in a process where they take the temperature on him and then make a final disposition whether he's eligible for slaughter or to be condemned right there for whatever reason. Prior to that, they're moved on up through the process to the stunning box. Most major plants right now, bigger beef plants, it's a V-type restrainer. The cattle move into it. They kind of step off in it. Their feet are hanging. You're loose. They're not on the floor. It's a V-type with a conveyor that moves them, where it will restrain that animal from movement.
Right.
Then when they do get to the stunner, most of them, in most of your beef plants, they use a pneumatic, air-operated stunner, or they'll use a captive bolt model,
right,
which basically runs a piston into the cranium of the animal and renders him insensible, to pain.
Okay. Yep.
Hogs, now most of your hogs are either electrically stunned or CO2 stunned.
Really?
Which CO2 stunning has been around now for a good many years. And say, for instance, they'll run maybe 60 pigs into a chute or a pen, and that pen closes on all sides and it goes under the ground. And when it goes under there, there's CO2 gas, and when they come back up, the animals are asleep.
Right.
I talked to and I can't mention the plant, but there was a maintenance supervisor that had some problems with that, and they were installing it. It's when they installed it, and he was in it, and I guess somebody didn't think they were in the pen. Well, he got caught in there, and when he went down and come back up, he was out. And of course, the paramedics were there and this and that and what have you, revived him. But he just said it was the most peaceful thing. He told me, he said he just went right to sleep.
Wow.
He just, got real sleepy and it was it. He said a peaceful way to go.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And then, of course, at that point, whether it be the hogs, lambs, or beef, chains put on the hind leg, they're raised up, and then exsanguination.
Got a project you'd like to work on with the SHC team? Shoot Ben an email on ben@smokinghotconfessions.com and let's have a conversation.
If you're looking for your next barbecue smoker or grill, Jagged Woodfired has got what you need. Owners Julianne and Glenn are multiple award-winning barbecue competitors who've even traveled to the US to compete at the World Barbecue Championships in Houston, Texas. Based out of Perth and shipping nationwide, Jagged is one of the largest pit builders in the country and has an ever-growing lineup of meat cooking machinery. Not only do they have their now famous smoker ovens, they are also producing incredibly efficient gravity-fed cabinet smokers and some of the most stylish asado grills you're ever going to see. Jagged is also well known for amazingly detailed custom work, ranging from backyard designs all the way to installations in commercial kitchens. Proudly Australian designed, owned and manufactured, you can find out more at jaggedwoodfired.com.au, spelled Jagrd. Once again, head to jaggedwoodfired.com.au, spelled Jagrd, to learn more. So then how does the halal method work? Like, what's the process there?
Halal slaughters and kosher slaughter, the animal is put into a restrainer. Their head sticks out. There is a bar that goes under their jaw pneumatically, and it will extend the neck of the animal. And as kosher slaughter, a helper will wash the neck and squeegee the neck, and then the rabbi will come and make his cut.
With the knife, okay.
And it's kosher slaughter, I've witnessed it literally millions of animals.
Yep.
And in my opinion, if it's done right, in my opinion, that's the most humane form of slaughter.
Right.
In my opinion.
And
within seconds, that animal is just He's just gone.
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
just gone.
Yeah. So is the difference then between halal and kosher then, is that to do with the prayers? Is that what that is? Is that what
No, it involves, on the kosher slaughter, it's much more entailed than the halal slaughter. A lot of the emphasis is put on the sharpness of the knife, the khalif that they would use. There's only special knives that they use for that.
Okay.
The knife that they use, the blade, they're very long. Depends on what species you're on.
Sure.
But it has to be twice as long as the animal's throat.
Okay.
That the animal they're slaughtering.
Yep.
And the edge on these knives are, the blade is checked prior to slaughter and immediately after slaughter. And it's checked with a thumbnail or a fingernail, which you run it up on the blade and you can feel any nick. Wow. If there's any nick at all, that animal's not kosher.
Okay.
At all. And then also prior to slaughter, the rabbis do their own inspection. The animal has to be in perfect health, and then it gets into even more detail with that. There's certain fats that have to be removed. That's not permissible. You know, the hindquarters are not saved. That's treif or unclean, because they only save the forequarters because the meat has to be deveined,
right,
salted, and washed. And it's a very, very elaborate process, and it's taken extremely seriously. Whereas the halal is not as in-depth as far as the kosher slaughter.
Okay.
Right.
So the biggest differentiating factor then would be the conscious state of the animal.
Absolutely.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's
Yes.
that would be the
in
driving...
the kosher form of slaughtering, the humane treatment of that animal is so much a factor involved in it.
It does sound like a very respectful process.
The Shokit rabbis, and I know many, these are some of the most wonderful people I've ever known in my life. They take their job extremely seriously, you know, because, you know, if that animal suffers, they failed, you know, and they take it to heart. I mean, you know, it bothers them a lot.
And the follow-on then would be that their congregation cannot eat, basically. So
exactly.
the welfare of the congregation kind
of...
But
it all goes back to what I was saying,
rabbis,
that, you know, if that animal, if we have to take that animal's life to sustain our life, we give that animal the utmost respect.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So we've talked about then about sort of the history of the meat industry. We've talked about where it's at now with some of the new developments in animal rights movements and how that's impacted the meat industry as a whole. What do you see coming up in the future, in the next sort of 20 years? Are we going to be eating synthetic meat out of labs?
I would hope not.
Me too.
I would hope not. I'm not a fan of that at all, you know. In fact, the state of Missouri, they just recently, a few months ago, passed a law that if you label a product meat, it has to be, can't be grown in a test tube. You know, it can't be on a petri dish. I mean, it's got to be from an animal, you know.
Now, my wife did just send me an article about that just recently, saying that they had actually, just literally in the last 2 or 3 weeks, had actually changed that definition to allow meat grown in a lab to be classified as meat.
In the state of Missouri?
Oh, I don't know about the state of Missouri specifically, but just
I know
USDA
there's,
as a whole.
With the USDA, there's a lot out there right now. Any final rulings, I'm not familiar with them, or I haven't heard anything personally, you know. And then, of course, different countries, you know, it's going to be different, you know, in the U.S. as it would be in Australia or somewhere else. So what I see the future of the meat industry, again, our consumers now are demanding quality, and the highest quality obtainable. You're going to see more branded items. You're going to see more flavorings again, newer flavorings in areas that, of course, anywhere in the South, our food is much more seasoned than it would be in the Midwest or up north. That's changing really fast. And, it's just the generational aspect of it. It's the generational. We're seeing a lot of consolidation now with some of the major meat packers. They're buying up each other, different countries are buying, Smithfield Foods is one. They were sold. JBS Swift purchased National Beef Packers here recently, or controlling interest of them. So we're going to see more and more of that. And again, more cuts in the meat industry or beef industry, more retail cuts, newer retail cuts to maximum utilize that carcass as much as we can, like a flat iron steak they came up with years ago, that muscle.
Yep.
You're going to see more and more of that, to maximum utilize that entire carcass.
I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to reduce the environmental impact of the meat industry, which like I'm all about eating meat, but I was also raised in a generation where we're really concerned about the environment as well. So I love all that sort of stuff, the creativeness of finding these new cuts and then working out how to cook them, and I love all that sort of stuff.
And then also to confinement feeding operations.
What's that?
Well, large-scale feeding operations like in the pork sector or the poultry sector or whatever. You're seeing a lot more now, free range. You're seeing...
Okay, so you're talking about like in Australia, we'd refer to that as battery feeding.
Right.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay. One instance right here in Louisiana, he's a very good friend of mine, Galen Iverstein Family Farms, meats in Baton Rouge. They own a farm in Kentwood. They raise all their hogs, cattle, and poultry. They're grass-fed. They're grain and grass-fed. The hogs are free to roam. I mean, they're not confinement hogs, and the end product it's unbelievable. The product that he's producing right now. And Galen is a young man. I've followed him several years now. He's got a meat market in Baton Rouge on Perkins, and he's doing really well with it. And he's just getting ready to make the jump to get into his own harvest facility, slaughter plant.
Wow.
So I'm helping him with that a little bit to get that going.
Yeah.
Rather than having to transport animals, 140 miles away to a slaughter facility. That's very stressful. Even that short trip is very stressful to that animal. And it just makes more sense that he would only have to drive 20 miles from where that animal was raised all his life to, the processing.
That just made me think of a really tangential question, so forgive me for sidetracking this conversation. I spent 2 years living in South Korea, and you were just talking about how just simply transporting them 140 miles can really stress the animal. They had dog farms over there where they would farm a particular breed of dog for slaughter for food, and the traditional Korean way of slaughtering them was to actually beat them with a stick first. With the theory was to get the adrenaline up, to get the adrenaline into the blood, and then you slaughter the dog, and then you eat the dog meat. And it was supposed to be good for man.
Really?
Does that sound right at all?
That sounds the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. And I would hope Nobody in this country would ever do it. And if they did, they better not let me find out about it, you know. But no, and what we tell people, and you know, we're here to slaughter animals. We're not here to torment them. We're not here to mistreat an animal. That's not the case. You know, you get an animal stirred up, or you get them agitated, or whatever. Many times in our own facility, my family's facility, that animal would not be slaughtered that day. We may have to hold him 2 or 3 days sometimes to get him to calm down.
So you really don't want that adrenaline pumping.
Oh my gosh, no, that affects the meat quality. You would end up with a dark cutter, or the blood sugars, the adrenaline in the animal. It would be like a marathon runner. What we refer to as a dark cutter, like if you ran a marathon and they looked at your leg muscle would probably be darkish blue to black. You know, instead of the cherry red.
Would be if
you
I
understand what I'm
about
saying?
A marathon. Yeah.
And it's called dark cutters, and it's a huge problem in the meat industry. Dark cutters in the cattle industry is stress, pre-slaughter stress, and it's a huge problem. Hog in the pork sector, we have a problem called PSE, pale, soft, and excredative pork. That's confinement raised hogs, or any hog that is stressed prior to slaughter, you know. So again, and I think you've really heard me stress on this. That animal, prior to slaughtering, you have to take the utmost care of that animal and remain as calm and everything. You can't be rattling. You can't be using. At our slaughter facility, we never allowed hot shots, you know, electric, you know what I'm saying, a hot shot. Everything was very calm. In fact, in the hog pens where we'd hold the hogs, we had the radio station playing. The hogs preferred WWOZ out in New Orleans. They liked that music, and they would be asleep. You know, we'd have to wake them up to say, hey, let's go, you know. Again, in the future, as where we're going, you're going to see more and more of that too, animal welfare. And I know there's a lot of issues right now with the environmental impact. You know, that was one of the reasons the meat industry, you know, years ago, they were centered around the stockyards, like the Union stockyards in Chicago, the Kansas City stockyards, national stockyards in East St. Louis, St. Paul, Sioux City, Iowa, all over the terminal markets. So a lot of these animals were being brought from, say, western Colorado, for example, on a rail car, all the way to Chicago. Now, could you imagine the stress on that animal? Being that far on a rail car, no food,
thousands
no water.
and thousands of miles, isn't it?
Sometimes they'd be on there a week before they were unloaded. No food, no water.
Wow.
You know, so the meat industry and the livestock industry has really, really cleaned their act up. And any of your listeners, I would encourage them to, if you live by a facility, I don't know really any processors, whether it be small or large, if you would say, I would like to tour your facility, that would turn you down. I really don't know of too many. And if they would turn you down, they wouldn't be a good operator in my book, you know.
Yeah, transparency is definitely the key in this 21st century. Look, Dan, I want to say thank you very much for your time this morning. I realise you're a busy man. There's people popping in and out the door here. There's obviously something that they're putting together on inside in the demo kitchen in there. So, mate, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to say thanks very much for your time, and I'm sure my listeners have appreciated you sharing your wisdom with us.
I appreciate you coming today, and I guess I'll be seeing you this weekend with Hogs for the Cause.
I'll be there.
You'll be there, good. We're looking to have a good time, and I really enjoyed talking with you, and thank you so much.
And there you have it, family. The comprehensive history of meat in America with legend of the industry, Dan Robert. Be sure to add the National Southern Food and Beverage Museum to your road trip list. Not only is the place packed to the rafters with fascinating pieces of iconic Southern history, but there are often special events there, and of course, you'll be able to meet Dan Robert himself. Before I let you go, I want to remind you about our killer merch lineup, the Smoking Hot Confessions community on Facebook, and if you have a minute, it'd really help me out if you could subscribe, rate, and review the show. The ratings and reviews trigger the algorithms and make Apple distribute the podcast further and wider, so they are really important and very much appreciated. And that's the end of the show. Till next time, take care of each other and keep on queuing.
Thanks for listening to the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast. Head on over to smokinghotconfessions.com for recipes, tips, and Ben's own confessions.